Hello everyone! My videos for the past week were mostly about the London Chess Classic and AlphaZero versus Stockfish, so it would be nice to get back into the classics, at least for a bit. And for this occasion this was a suggestion from a subscriber, I chose the game Carlos Torre Repetto versus world champion Emanuel Lasker. And this game, it's a brilliant game, but it also has a lot of historical significance. Now, something about Carlos Torre Repetto, he's a grandmaster from Mexico. This game is actually called, some call it the Seventh Seal, but people from Mexico mostly call it the Mexican Immortal. And when I heard this, Mexican Immortal, I immediately wanted to see this game. I don't think I've ever seen it. I know of Torre, and of course everyone knows who Emanuel Lasker is, but I don't think I ever saw this particular game. It was played in 1925 in a very strong tournament in Moscow. What do you expect? It's a chess tournament in Moscow. Of course, it's going to be strong. There were 21 players playing there, and by strong, I mean Akiba Rubinstein won 12th place in the end. So imagine that. Akiba Rubinstein, who was at one point considered to be the strongest player in the world, got 12th place. Efim Bogolyubov had a brilliant tournament. He won first place with 15.5 points, followed by Emanuel Lasker with 14 points, and in third place was Jose Raul Capablanca. So, very strong players, two world champions in the first three places. Fourth was Frank Marshall, and in fifth place was Carlos Torre Repetto. So definitely a strong grandmaster, and winning a fifth place in such a tournament is great stuff. So let's see this game. We have d4. Torre has the white pieces, knight to f6 and knight to f3. We have e6 and bishop to g5. And now many of you play bishop to g5 knowing it's the Torre attack. And it's the Torre attack because of Carlos Torre Repetto and because of this game played against world champion Emanuel Lasker in the Moscow tournament of 1925. But you'll see what I mean by this. c5 by Lasker. We have e3, c captures on d4, e captures on d4, and bishop to e7. Knight b to d2 by Torre, d6, c3, knight b to d7, and bishop to d3. b6 by Lasker, preparing to develop the light square bishop, knight to c4, bishop to b7 now, queen e2, queen to c7, Torre castles, Lasker castles, and rook f to e1. Now developing rooks, rook f to e8, Lasker also does this, rook a to d1, and we have knight to f8. So all of the white's pieces are perfectly developed, and now it's time to find a plan. Torre plays bishop back to c1, and whenever I see bishop retreat in a game, I know it's going to be a great game. Something like whenever I see a nice rook lift. Knight to d5 by Lasker, and we have knight to g5 now, with some pressure on the h7 pawn, but nothing too serious. b5 kicking the knight, knight to a3, b4, c captures on b4, knight captures on b4. Now Lasker is threatening to capture this strong light square bishop, and the move you would expect is probably something like bishop to b1, and maybe a move like h6 or rook to c8. It depends, but instead of this, after knight to b4, Torre plays queen to h5, now threatening to capture on h7, as the queen, knight, and bishop are attacking it. So bishop captures on g5. g6 was probably a better move, but Lasker doesn't see anything wrong with bishop captures on g5. Bishop captures on g5, bishop captures on g5, and now knight captures on d3. A rook lift with a tempo, rook captures on d3, and we have queen to a5. A very strong move by Lasker, immobilizing this dark square bishop, also threatening ideas like f6 to win the piece. And here we have b4, trying to kick the queen away from pinning this bishop. Queen to f5 by Lasker, and now rook to g3, positioning the rook for some future bishop f6, h6 ideas. We have h6 here, and now comes knight to c4. The piece is lost. There's nothing to do here, but Torre takes this opportunity to bring his long-lost knight on a3 back into the game. And here Lasker played queen to d5, and it seems odd that he doesn't capture the bishop. But what would happen if the bishop is captured is probably something like h captures on g5, Knight captures on d6 now, attacking the queen and also the bishop on b7, and after queen g6, queen captures, knight captures, and maybe knight captures on b7, attacking the knight. Knight goes back, rook captures, and after knight to b3, the material is equal, and it's probably something like a draw, but I don't know. I mean, Lasker was the stronger player. It's very unusual that he decided not to go for this. But maybe that's just the case. He considered himself the stronger player. He didn't want to allow Torre probably any drawing chances. So after knight to c4, he played queen to d5, and here we have knight to e3, attacking the queen. And again, here Lasker plays queen to b5, and it's interesting, why doesn't Lasker capture the d4 pawn? Well, of course, he still wants to pin this bishop here, but if you play queen captures on d4, then you get bishop captures on h6, with threats of rook captures on g7. And after knight to g6, bishop to g5, queen captures on b4, rook to d1, bishop to e4, and knight to g4. Queen to a4, probably knight to f6 check, and after this, something like this position could arise. You can't really stop checkmate on g7. And this happens in all the variations. This is just one of them, so black would probably have to give up the queen to stop this, but this is completely winning for white. So instead of capturing on d4, Lasker plays queen to b5. And now bishop captures on h6 doesn't work. Simply, you capture the queen, bishop captures, and you don't really threaten any discovery. Simply knight g6, covering up, and white is lost here. But here comes the problem. After queen to b5, Lasker missed Torre's next move, and the next move is actually bishop to f6, and this is beautiful. By playing bishop to f6, you're threatening to capture on g7. Also, you opened up attack on the black queen on b5, but also you're offering your own queen on h5. So what do you do here? Well, there's really nothing to do but accept the queen. Any other move loses terribly. So Lasker captures it, and here it comes. Lasker against the windmills. Rook captures on g7 with check. King to h8, this is the only move. Rook captures on f7, check. King to g8, again only move. Again, rook to g7, check. King to h8, only move. Now rook captures on b7. Again, a discovered check from the bishop. King has to go back to g8, only move. Now rook to g7, check again. King has to go back to h6, h8, and now rook to g5, check. Again checking the king, and now attacking the queen with the rook. King has to go to h7. Now rook captures on h5. And this was the position Carlos Torre had to see before he went into all of this. King to g6 move, that the bishop and the rook will be attacked, but he saw everything, and everything is perfectly fine. Rook to h3, king to f6, rook captures on h6, and now you're simply 3 pawns up in an endgame. Even world champion Emanuel Lasker is unable to stop this. King g5, rook to h3 now, rook e to b8, rook to g3 check, king to f6, rook to f3 check, king g6, now a3, a5, b captures on a5, rook captures, knight to c4 with a tempo, also defending the a3 pawn, rook to d5, rook to f4, defending the d4 pawn, knight to d7, rook to e6 now with check, king has to go to g5, and after g3, in this position, Emanuel Lasker resigned the game. It's simply too much to take. I mean, you're up 4 pawns, moves like h4 are coming, Lasker is getting smothered here. So he doesn't want to play this anymore, and he resigns the game. And so Carlos Torre, like I said, won 5th place in this amazingly strong tournament. Lasker got 2nd place in the end, but still, this Mexican Immortal game was created. And I don't think, I mean, on chessgames.com, this game is called The Seventh Seal, although I don't think it has anything to do with the movie Seventh Seal. There is a chess game in that movie, but I believe the pieces on the board are just scrambled. Even at one point, they just change scenes, and then the pieces look totally different. So I don't think they, paid any attention. Maybe this was kind of a template for that game, but it wasn't ever finished in the movie. So yeah, that's the game. And 1 year after this game was played in 1926, Carlos Torre Repeto had a mental breakdown, and he spent the rest of his years in a mental institution, which was kind of sad. Some people said that it's due to his wife leaving him for another man, but you know, that's what happens if you spend your days playing chess. Eventually you'll get to beat Emmanuel Lasker and create the Mexican Immortal game, but then again your wife will leave you for another man, probably one that plays soccer or something. So yeah, but Ruben Fine visited Torre, you know, some years later while he was in the mental institution, and Ruben Fine said that he still could play good chess. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for recommending such a lovely game where Carlos Torre Repeto defeats world champion Emmanuel Lasker. And now you know, after this bishop to g5 move, that is the Torre attack, why it's called the Torre attack, and it's because Carlos Torre Repeto defeated world champion Emmanuel Lasker in the very strong tournament in Moscow of 1925. So, you know, do share with your friends. So yeah, as usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon.